Well, I'm back, delighted to say, at Chris Robertshaw's pad this week, very posh. And, well, you promised you were going to go to Tim Moulton, and we're going to come into a section we're going to do later.
Yeah.
So you covered lots of things there. But we're going to talk here about energy and its resilience and its strategy and the future of, going green, I think, wasn't it? The Isle of Man's plan to do it by a certain time, but that you think has changed from what you've been hearing. Over to you.
Oh, I don't think it's changed. I think I think we now find that our energy security strategy is in complete and utter disarray. Now people go, whoa.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do that.
You know,
what's it all about?
What's this about? Well, the reference point here I would ask people to consider is very, very recently the Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review Committee, and remember their conversations are all placed on Hansard, so they're recorded permanently. And they were interviewing the Chief Executive and the Chief Financial Officer of MU on the matter of energy security strategy. It was so alarming, this exchange between these two groups was so alarming that Phil Gorn took the highlights of that session and placed it on his programme Perspective, which is now up on Manx Radio. So if anybody goes to listen again and goes to the Perspective programme for the 19th of October, they will hear themselves what I'm going to talk about now. So all of this is evidence.
Right, because in place, the Tim Moulton has passed that we're going to go completely green by certain dates, and we're going to do everything very differently. Wind power, you name it, is going to be in there.
Well, the summary of this discussion really will look at two things. First of all, the zealot enthusiasm of almost the entire House when they came in at the election point and how they were going to achieve all sorts of things. In fact, the reality is now crashing through the door of Tynwald and making all these wonderful plans of theirs redundant. I mean, it sounds extraordinary. And what I would say is that when people start to really examine this in detail and realise what a concerning situation we're putting ourselves in, that it's going to be terribly, terribly important that the new House comes in with a much more grounded reality about how we achieve movement towards net.
We touched on this last week. I mean, the fact is, everyone was going, yes, we've got to do it. And now people are going,
oh, well, yes.
Maybe not quite as fast as we thought. No.
Yeah, if you listen to the Perspective programme, you'll hear some alarming things. Let's talk about them.
Okay.
So, if you recall that when this House came in, two of the main things were, people will remember this, the power stations got to close by 2035, and of course we're going to put an interconnector into the UK.
Another one. We haven't.
Yes, another one. The current one, according to that session, that Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review session, MU said, well, it's getting on now, and if we use it, my word sparingly, but I think it encapsulates what they were indicating. If we use it sparingly, we can extend the life out to 60 years. But the key point was that don't use it too much. So the existing one mustn't be used too much. So the point that the committee then asked, the question the committee then asked, was, well, what's the position about the new interconnector? And this was the reply, and people can check it for themselves. The reply was, well, when we started out on this, the anticipated cost for the interconnector was 100 million. He then says now it's in the region of 200 million.
It's doubled?
It's doubled. And
it'll go up again before we get it done.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you could say that by the time you got to the point where it was agreed and passed and actually happened, we're probably talking about $250 million. And MU was saying, it's out of the question. So,
sorry, they've ruled it out.
As good as let people listen to them. Yes, I mean,
but that's part of the plan. It has to.
It's a fundamental pillar of everything. When you take that pillar away, everything falls down.
Because the gas can't be switched off. I'm guessing you're going to Terminex, right? If that's the case, there's no new.
Let's deal with this before we look at other things. But the other matter was, well, okay, if that's the situation, what about the closure of the power station in Douglas? Oh, well, you know, then the story was, and I hope people will listen for themselves, the story was, well, we'll find ways of extending it, you know. And then an extraordinary statement was made then. When the committee pushed the MU leaders to explain what was going to happen, one of the points made was, and they were floundering somewhat, one of the main points was, well, we're looking at HVO. So the committee then said, well, what's HVO to power a power station?
What is HVO?
And as I was listening to this, that's exactly the question I came up with. And the answer is hydrogenated vegetable oil, HVO.
Cooking fat.
Yeah, it's the stuff. It's used. It's called used or waste food stocks. It's the fat out of fish and chip shops and things. And I'm thinking, am I really hearing this? Because there is a limited amount of HVO around the UK. It powers small facilities, and there is talk, I think it's in Ireland, of HVO powering a power station for intermittent purposes only. In other words, opposite the wind farm. But are we seriously now talking about the future of our energy security supply dependent upon old fish and chip shop oil? You can't. Yeah, but it's beyond reason.
This is Phil King and Co from the MU saying this on the radio and in the committee.
To be fair to Phil and Simon, I have to say that, sort of thinking back on that session again, I got the impression that what they're trying to do as MU is respond to the will of Parliament, to the will of Tynwald. And Tynwald, is, as you recall, rushed in at the beginning of this House, shouting from the top of the rooftops how important going green now was. And I think that mindless approach to a very difficult problem has placed the MU in an almost impossible position. So what the alternatives offered? One was hydrogenated vegetable oil. Another one was, we're looking at an interconnector with the offshore wind farm, but of course he says we don't know when that might be, 2030 and beyond. But hang on a second. The Ørsted will be, I presume, applying for the go-ahead from the UK government for the Crogga wind farm in the round 8 applications. Now, currently we're in round 7 with 2026, but UK has just announced we're putting it back for a year to 2027, that's round 7, because there are cost implications and difficulties. So the Ørsted application will presumably go to 2029, 2030, if they get it, and of course there's a whole world around the ifs on that one. But what needs to be taken into account, that even then, and if they got it, there's a 10-year delay on applications for getting into the UK grid. So we're talking about the possibility, and I'm happy to be challenged on this, the possibility of the Isle of Man offshore wind farm going live in late 2030s, possibly 2040. But the point I didn't get with regard to an interconnector to the Isle of Man wind farm field was that, well, what would the point of that be? Because if you were trying to find power to supply our grid when the wind wasn't blowing, what's the point of putting a further interconnector into the Isle of Man wind farm? So, and there's another point that not many people are aware of, that Ørsted can't go ahead until such time as MEMA, that's the Isle of Man body responsible for offshore regulation, have got their regs in place, and we've discussed that.
These would be Manx regs?
Yeah, they have to be Manx regs. But what happens when DOI, bless them, when DOI introduced and updated, as they needed to, updated Harbour Act. I think it was 2010. I'm willing to be corrected on that. They actually brought forward a lot of the stuff from the existing Act, which was 1905, a very old one. It's been drawn to DOI's attention now that that Act gives control to DOI for a significant section of the coastline around Douglas Harbour, from Port Sodrick to north of Onchan and Laxey, and out into the sea some significant distance. That section of the sea will not be covered by MEMA regulations. So there's a gap. They can't get a cable in through an area of sea that's not regulated, but they can't afford to take it in from the wind farm, the cable, from north of Onchan or south of Port Sodrick to get it to the power station feed-in point, because it's incredibly expensive. So everything's collapsing around us. I mean, we're heading for a real crisis. It's down to the next house to come in with a solid dose of reality. How do we get to a situation where the Isle of Man has got a safe, secure, and ultimately green supply? It's a lot more difficult and a lot more complicated.
I've been to some of those presentations about these on-island wind farms and the cost it's going to be, and a lot of people were saying even there, surely instead of producing onshore wind farms, the cost of that, which is huge, isn't it, could be put into the interconnector, and we restore the gas turbines as the backup plan, but let's just plug into somebody else. They're doing all the work for us, and just use the electricity from across as our main provider with a backup plan, of course.
I think that's a foolish idea for two reasons. Yeah. First of all, the cost of that interconnector has just shot through the roof.
But it's going to save money on these wind farms if we did that.
Well, you don't have to spend the money on the wind farms in the first place.
Well, they are going to, aren't they?
Well, they need to stop thinking about that, because let me just answer your first question. I'll come back to that. So is it sensible to pursue a new interconnector that costs an absolute arm and a leg in order for us to do what? To lock into the most expensive electricity anywhere in the world, as of when we're speaking at least. So what we're creating is a huge bill for ourselves in order to what? Avoid having to spend some money on...
I get what you're saying there, but the price is meant to be coming down, isn't it? And all that. They keep saying that...
Who said it's coming down?
Well, the various UK parties are saying, this is all, we've done the investment for the future, now we can start reaping the rewards at some point. I know you should take everything with a pinch of salt. Yeah. I'm only trying to balance this a bit.
Well, you're trying.
I'm trying. I'm always trying.
I think anybody listening to this who knows an element of what's happening in the UK, of course that's nonsense. I mean, our UK electricity now, with all its wind farms, the electricity is extremely expensive. I don't know how much longer Miliband is going to last. I mean, bless his cotton socks.
What do you see as the best in your wildly wisdom age you are?
I stand by what I've been saying all the way through, and many other people who've looked at this are saying exactly the same. Wise heads say this: use gas as the transitionary fuel. It's down in the EU as the transitionary fuel until the Isle of Man, and now we're heading slowly but progressively towards a crisis about where we get energy security from. Now, ultimately, it is not intermittent power. But I'm all for people putting solar panels on their roofs and small wind farms being introduced privately where it doesn't cost the taxpayer money. I mean, I'm all for that. I think in that session with the MU, I think MU were talking, I could be corrected here, they were talking about we're moving towards a capacity of about 9 megawatts coming in from the private sector. Great. But what's at the core of all this is permanent, safe, cost-effective supply. It's not intermittent. It's not the interconnector. Right.
You know what I'm going to say now? I have to say this because you have to now do transparency, that you are involved.
Well, I think everybody knows.
No, I have to do that because it's very important. So people understand where you may have a certain interest. You do have an interest because you are a shareholder in Crogga, which was going for, or whatever, may still be at some point. We discussed this last week, having some involvement. But that's so you're fixed on the gas thing as a transition at the end of the day still. So at some point in the future, we're going to have to go with something. And,
yes,
and the interconnector does sound like the most... Well, the other one, the interconnector, is coming to the end of its life, right? So it will have to be replaced at some point.
No, the interconnector that we've got now is not coming to the end of its life according to the MU. Its life is extended as long as we only use it very carefully and don't overheat it. That's what they said. Anyway.
Sure, and the new ones are bigger, better, and
very
whatever.
Very expensive. Now, I'm sorry I'm having to repeat this point. An extraordinarily expensive facility needs to be put in order to give us extraordinarily expensive electricity from the UK to fill in the gaps when we've got intermittent. No, we need the new house, because this house isn't going to deal with it. They're bless them. They're naive and zealot and thoughtless. Oh, let's go green, without understanding how difficult and complex this is. What we need to do is give ourselves time to wait for the next generation of facilities to come on stream. And I think I have said this before, but there's probably about 20 big companies around the world developing generating facilities which are non-intermittent and are completely green. And we need to give them time to mature, to be absolutely proven, and at that stage, that's when the Isle of Man should reach out and replace its gas with non-fossil fuel green energy on a permanent basis.
So very quickly to finish, are you for any offshore wind production? Are you for onshore wind production on the Isle of Man, or do you think all of this is also too expensive? I started off ambivalent on both. The more one knows, the more I think you find you turn against it. It's not the solution. It's genuflecting at the altar of the green environment move without fully understanding the difficult business issues. I mean, there's hardly any members in Tynwald with a business background. I mean, if they really thought about it and understood it better, then they'd be a lot more cautious than they are now. I mean, I sat in there yesterday listening to Claire Barber waxing lyrical about net zero and employing more people to do this, that and the other job, all posturing. Why? Because we're losing a grip on the fundamentals and we're getting lost. So we are now in disarray, Paul. It's not funny. I mean, just going back to one point, just wrap this up.
Just come to mind on this extraordinary HVO idea. In other words, firing our power stations up with used fish and chip shop oil. It happened.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Brought to you by Port Jack Chippy.
Compliments of.
Yes.
Yeah, it's laughable, isn't it?
Well, it produces an awful lot, I think.
HVO, it's a biodiesel it turns into ultimately, but the cost of HVO is at least double the cost of
I can tell you they're already mandated to use that on planes in the UK. They've got to use more of that stuff, because I was just watching a program about the other day. As time goes on, so the mix in your fuel as you fly off will be a certain percentage will be made up of that.
Okay, so what you're saying is there's more and more demand for a very limited availability of a particular,
and they're mandated to do that
product, which is expensive to collect, expensive to change. Well, I think what they do is they push hydrogen into it and push the oxygen
I think again
out.
These things will slide. There's a good chance that these mandates and dates they fixed won't happen.
So okay, so what I'm
Let's wrap this up. Go on, finish off.
Very quickly.
Go on.
What's happening now is we've been in an Alice in Wonderland world now for the whole of this particular house, and reality and of the whole situation is now crashing in on them. I don't expect them to do much about it. They'll keep posturing till the election, and then hopefully the people who come in next time are a lot more grounded.